Hi, I'm Tasnim, and before we get into the main recording, the first 30 minutes of this workshop unfortunately were not captured, so I'm going to quickly recap what we covered. So, we started by introducing decision making, or DM, and what the section is actually designed to test, using the information provided to make logical decisions and draw conclusions without relying on outside assumptions. So, as you can see from this slide, it's the second section of the UCAT. It's 37 minutes and 47 marks, so that gives you quite a bit of time per question. And there are four things you will be tested on throughout the section: logical reasoning, data interpretation, probability and statistics, and critical thinking under ambiguity, as said. We then introduced the two question formats we'll be focusing on, which were yes, no, and multiple choice, and briefly discussed how to approach them before moving into actual examples and strategies. That's where the rest of the recording picks up, so let's get into it. Great, okay, let's go back to it. So, mooms, pluders, nisons, and copens are types of fish. All mooms are pluders. No pluder is a nison. Both pluders and nisons are copens. Okay, lots of words, lots of, I don't know, ands and nots. But let's look at the statements. If a fish is a moom, it is a copen. Okay, automatically, I cannot do that in my head, so I will be writing out at least the first letters of all of these. So M for mooms, P for pluders, N for nisons, and K for copens, which is pretty helpful. And we know all mooms are pluders. So for that, I'll just put a circle where all mooms are pluders. So a big circle for pluders, and then a circle within that for mooms. And that's just going to be labeled M. Then we know no pluder is a nison. So we know the circle for pluder does not intercept or overlap with the circle for nisons. So that will just be separated. And then we know that both pluders and nisons are copens. So while the pluders and nisons don't overlap, they are both encompassed as copens. So there'll be a massive circle encompassing all of that and labeled K for copens. Now I can actually look at the question and hopefully understand. So if a fish is a moom, it is a copen. So I look for that circle which is labeled M and see whether it's within K for copen. And for me it is. So for that one, I'll put yes, or I'll drag it over here for yes. Then for the next statement, it's no nison is a moom. So I'd look at where nison is and I'd look at where moom is, or I'd look back at the statements if you could do that in your head. I'm just going to look at my diagram and we can see that the nisons and the mooms do not overlap. So that would be a no. Oh, wait, nope. No nison is a moom. No nison is a moom. Actually, no. We can't. That is not a no because we can't assume. I just made an assumption and that's what you do not do. Because in the text it does not say whether nisons are mooms or whether they're not mooms or vice versa. You can't assume nisons are mooms, aren't mooms. So it in this case it necessarily follows. Do any of you disagree with that? I think for this in this case you'd put yes. No nison is a moom. Oh wait, sorry. Oh my god, I'm mixing up. It's just yes. No nison is a moon because the circles do not overlap. Is that understandable or have I confused you guys? You can just put a thumbs up. Okay. Okay, thank you. Just needed that confirmation. Okay, with that, I'm just going to move on. Sorry for that. And then we've got the next statement. If an animal is a pluder, it is not a moom. So for me, pluder is a round moom. So that just doesn't make sense because they overlap. So it'd be no. And then the next one is no copens or mooms. So you look at copens and mooms. And again, that's a no because copens are around everything in my Venn diagram. So that includes the mooms. So it's again no. Then if a fish is a pluder but not a moom, it is a copen. Okay, so we need to be a bit more careful because there's a bit more with this statement. So if a fish is a pluder, right? So I look for pluder in my Venn diagram, but not a moom. Okay, so a round moom, it is a copen. Yeah, because copen encapsulates everything. So again, it'd be yes. So the answer for this one is yes, yes, no, no, yes. And that should take you around a minute. And obviously, you're not going to be reading it out loud. You're probably going to skim through the text, write down what you do know, and then answer the questions. Is that all right with everyone? Yep. Okay. Thank you, Arib. Okay. So this one is a bit more tricky, and I want you guys to see why. But again, I'll give you around like 30 seconds just to read through the question and make some notes, and then I'll go through it. So for this one, you want to be a bit more suspicious of the statements. Yes, they are longer, but they also have a few words that might trip people out, and that's pretty common. Okay. So for this one, I'm going to read through the text, then read the statements, and then we'll just go through. Well, actually, I won't read the statements. I'll just go through them one by one. Okay, so most of the cars in the car park just had electric engines, but some of the others were hybrid vehicles, while there were a few petrol engine cars and a smaller number of diesel engine cars. Okay, that's quite a lot already. All of the cars that only had electric engines were red, but most of the hybrid cars were white, while those cars that were neither red nor white were green. Okay, a lot of words. Probably should make some notes, but I'm going to read the first statement. There were more diesel and petrol cars in the car park than there were red cars. Okay. So that's asking for obviously addition, I guess, unless they've explicitly stated that. So go back to the text, sorry. Most of the cars in the car park just had electric engines. And this is why you should probably make down some notes, because otherwise you're going to keep going back to the text and trying to retrieve stuff. Okay, so for the first statement, I would disagree. It says there are more diesel and petrol cars in the car park than there were red cars, but we know all of the cars that had electric engines were red, and those that were hybrid cars were neither red nor white. And then we don't know anything else about colors. So in this case, the statement just doesn't follow. We don't have enough information to make that assumption. So that would be no. Then we move on to the next statement. There were more petrol cars than diesel cars in the car park. Okay, so let's just see. Okay. Well, there were a few petrol engine cars and a smaller number of diesel engine cars. Well, right there, that's telling you all you really need. There were a smaller number of diesel engine cars than there were petrol engine cars. So for that one, we put yes. Then for the third statement, there were more green cars than white cars in the car park. Okay. Well, I don't think there are any numbers said, and there's no direct comparison between green cars and white cars in the car park. So again, the conclusion does not follow, and it would just be no. If there's no evidence given to you, then you can't say it's true. Then we've got the fourth statement. A green car that had an electric engine must have been a hybrid car. Okay, so we're looking at green and an electric engine. And it's a hybrid car. So we're looking at that last part. So most of the hybrid cars were white, while those cars that were neither red nor white were green. Right, and because there's no other mention of green, because all of the other cars that only had electric engines were red, it has to be yes. Because that is the only mention of green. It fits that statement. Then we've got the last statement. A diesel engine car that was neither white nor green must have been red. So that's a pretty strong statement, as well as the one we just had. Must and neither are very strong statements, and you need to find that evidence to back it up.
otherwise it will be a no. So a diesel engine car that was neither white nor green must have been red. So back here, um, yeah, you can assume from that last line, the whole last line, all of the cars that only had electric engines were red, but most of the hybrid cars were white, while those cars that were neither red nor white were green. So they're saying basically the cars can either be red, white, or green. So if it was neither white nor green, it has to have been red, right? So that's a yes. So for this question, the correct sequence would be no, yes, no, yes, yes. And hopefully you guys got that and understood that. If you haven't, please do tell me in the chat and I can try and explain it again. But for now, we're just going to move on to the different types of multiple choice questions. So now we're moving on to multiple choice. So rather than treating every question as a completely new problem, I find it much more useful to recognize what kind of problem you're looking at and immediately have a fast move in mind. So as you can see from this table, this is what I'd do if I saw these types of questions. So if you've got a logical puzzle, my first move would be to try and build a grid that has all the information, just so I can look at that grid that I understand rather than that text, like multiple times. If I saw a Venn diagram anywhere, I'd start by looking at the overlap and seeing what that overlap actually means and what it includes. And then if I saw a probability question, I'd try and convert everything into the same form. So if something was in percentages and another thing was in decimals, I'd either try and get them all into percentages or all into decimals, whatever you're most comfortable with. And then if I saw any assumptions, like we just saw, ask what that argument actually depends on. So that doesn't mean every question will fit perfectly into one box. These are just a broad overview, but it does help save a lot of time by giving you a default. So that's just a quick overview of all the multiple choice questions. And this is, I think, my main point of today. So stop holding the question in your head. And if I could tell myself that a year back, then I definitely would. So, one of the biggest things that can slow you down in decision making is trying to hold the entire question in your head. You read one condition, then another, and you think you remembered the first one, but now you've forgotten the second. So, you have to reread the whole thing. And suddenly you spent 40 seconds doing absolutely nothing. You remember nothing, but you're sure you've done something. So instead, externalize everything you read. If you're like, these are three tools that I would use: grid for ordering, matching, or logical puzzles, as I've just said. A circle, or just use circles for Venn diagrams or syllogisms, because syllogisms are a lot of words and Venn diagrams is a lot of data. I'd use a number line for probability, because it's all from 0 to 1, or for any sort of ranking, or for any sort of at least one question. So if you're holding more than two pieces of information in your head, and you're not confident you'll be able to carry any more, then stop and just write it down on your whiteboard. On your whiteboard, you'll have a lot of space, so don't be scared to use it. Then no one's going to analyze your whiteboard. That whiteboard is for you, so make use of it. It's not about pretty diagrams, it's really just about reducing your mental workload during the actual test. So, with that, we're going to look at this question. It's a logical puzzle, as said here, and I don't think it's too bad. It's a lot of deduction, but I'll give you 30 seconds to look at it and then I will be asking for your answer or what you think upon first glance, and we'll go through it. So, for this sort of question, I'd probably try and use a grid just because that's my default for logical puzzles, and your one might be a bit different, but at this point, try and do what you're most comfortable with as long as you understand that data given to you. Okay, do any of you think you've got an answer? And I won't blame you if I haven't. I haven't given you a full minute yet, so. Okay. I'm just gonna start talking through it if that's okay. B. Okay. Thank you for that guess. Before I tell you whether it's right, I'm just gonna explain how we get to that answer. Okay. So let's just start going through it then. So for this one, I'd read the question just to make sure what we're looking for. So in this case, it's which one of the following must be true. So that big word is in capitals for a reason. It has to be true. So that's telling you that there's probably answers that could have been true, but won't have, I guess it's not for certain in this case. So let's just look at the information given to us. So we've got four people given to us by letters H, I, J, and K. Are a doctor, a manager, a teacher, and a lecturer. Not necessarily in that order. Okay, that's good to know. They each own a different type of vehicle. Okay, so we know it's about jobs and vehicles automatically. So we know H is a doctor. So I'm just going to write H is D in this case, because for me that stands for doctor. J owns a sports car. So I'll be making a grid because there's two types of information here. One is job titles. So one I'm just gonna title as job, and the other one I'm just gonna title as car, even if it's not necessarily a car, because there is the option of a motorbike here. But that's just what I'm gonna name it quickly. So H is a doctor. We don't know what car they have yet, but J owns a sports car, which is good to know. So sports car, I'm gonna put S, and K owns an electric car. So I'm gonna put E for him or her, whoever it is. And the person who owns a motorbike is not the teacher. So we know whoever's a teacher cannot own that motorbike. And the manager polishes her scooter every weekend. That means whoever's a manager has a scooter. So which of the following must be true? So because I don't have a definitive place to put the manager, I don't know who the manager is. I'm just going to put to the side manager equals S or manager arrow S. So manager has a scooter. Well, I'll put SCO for scooter. And we know we haven't really learned much about I, so that kind of helps us in a sense. And we don't know who owns the motorbike. It's either H or I that owns the motorbike. And that's already giving us enough information to work out who has that motorbike because we know the manager has a scooter and J and K already have a vehicle which is not a scooter and H has a job which is a doctor. So I has to be the manager and I has to have the scooter as well because she's got that manager position. Okay, but now we still do not have the job for J and K and we don't know the vehicle for actually no, we can work out the vehicle for H because we know what car J, K, and I have. So J has that sports car, K has that electric car, and I, we've just worked out, has that scooter. So H has to have that remaining vehicle, which I think it was a motorbike. So H has a motorbike and is a doctor. And now we just need to, well, we can't really work out whose job is what, can we? The person who owns a motorbike is not the teacher. Well, we already worked that out because they're a doctor. Okay, we can't necessarily work out the job of J and K, I don't think, so let's just look at the statements now. So K is a teacher. Well, we don't necessarily know that. We don't know the job for K. K could be the teacher, but they equally could be a lecturer. So for that one, that just option isn't correct. Then we've got option B that was suggested. J is a teacher. Again, J could be a teacher, but we're not certain of that. And because it's a must be true statement, we cannot choose B in this case. J could be a teacher or a lecturer, so yeah, we're not 100% sure on that, and that's why we can't choose it. Then we've got I is a manager. According to the information we wrote down, I has to be the manager, because they have the scooter. So I'll choose C, but let's just quickly look at D. K is a manager. Well, that can't be true because we already worked out that I is a manager. And if I is a manager, K can't be a manager because they each got one of these jobs. So in this case, the correct answer would be C, not B. But that guess does make sense. Is that okay with everyone? I'd definitely use a grid for this solve question. Okay, good to know. Thank you. If you've got any questions, please do leave them in chat. But yeah, I'll be good. Okay, so we'll just move on to the next question, and it will be a different sort of question. This is a Venn diagram, and you will see quite a few in your actual UCAT, but hopefully this one isn't too bad. So I'm going to give you guys 30 seconds just to go through it, and then I'll work my way through it. And it might look intimidating because of all the shapes, but it's just look at the diagram really, and it should tell you everything you need to know. Okay, I'll just be careful with the wording because there are 4 statements you have to read through. Try, like in the UCAT, right now you've got a bit of time to actually read through everything carefully, but in the UCAT it's pretty easy to like miss a word. And if you miss a no or a not statement, it changes the whole meaning of that statement or that text. So yeah, be careful. B? Okay, good to see an answer. Anyone else wanna try and have a go? Marie, Lynn, anyone? If not, I can just start explaining it. Okay, I'm just gonna get into the explanation then. So we've got this diagram with a bunch of shapes. We've got these keys here, which will be very important. And we've got these statements. So we're looking for the following statement, which is true. We don't necessarily have to read all of this, but you can if you just want that context. It's about Malik and bespoke train carriages, and then it's just telling you what you get later on. So this is what he built this year. So based on the diagram, which of the following statements is true? So statement A, every carriage with reclining seats have mood lighting. Okay, so we're looking for reclining seats, which is, as said here, a circle. So this massive circle. And we're seeing whether every carriage with reclining seats had mood lighting. Mood lighting is that square. Mm. Oh, and every carriage, yeah. So that one is not true because the circle is far bigger than the square. If the square was outside of the circle, or like encapsulating the circle, then that would be true. But in this case, some people with reclining seats had mood lighting, but not all of them. Then we've got option B. No carriage with Wi-Fi connectivity had no other feature. So there's 2 no's there, you've got to be careful of that. So we're looking for Wi-Fi connectivity, which is that rectangle here, and no other feature. No carriage with Wi-Fi connectivity had no other feature, which means basically we're looking to see whether those carriages with Wi-Fi connectivity had any other feature. So we've got that rectangle here, and it's within all the shapes. So they had air purifiers at one point, they had power outlets at another point, they also had mood lighting at another point. So B would be true. But just to make sure, we're going to quickly go through C and D. But yeah, B was correct. So we've got C. At least one carriage with air purifiers had both reclining seats and power outlets. So one carriage with okay. So we're looking at air purifiers, which is the arrow, had both reclining seats and power outlets. So reclining seats is circle and power outlets is that hexagon. But we can immediately rule that out because power outlets does not overlap with air purifiers. So that's not correct. And D is some carriages with power outlets had either one or two other features. So power outlets again, we're looking at hexagon, had either one or two other features. So we've got this power outlet here, and they can have reclining seats or Wi-Fi connectivity. Huh. I think I've confused myself with that one. Some carriages have had either one or two other features. Oh, that is not true because it's this either statement here. Had either one or two other features. They can also have no other features, as you can see on the right-hand side. So, yeah, just be careful of wording. I tricked myself up there, so it has to be B. In the actual UCAT, if you don't have the time to look through the other options and you're pretty confident, do stick to your first instinct. And hopefully you have time later to review it. With that, let's move on to our probability question. Oh, just so, could you re-explain B? Of course, yeah. Okay, so this is another wording thing. With these sorts of questions, you want to be careful with wordings. With Venn diagrams, normally you do get numbers, but sometimes you won't, which is why I chose this question. So the statement is no carriage with Wi-Fi connectivity. So immediately we're looking for a carriage with Wi-Fi connectivity. Had no other feature. So what they're saying is basically what I did was I inverted the statement. I said all carriages with Wi-Fi connectivity had another feature. That's what I did because if you're looking, I mean, we can do it the other way around if that helps. So let's look at all the carriages without Wi-Fi connectivity. So that would be everything outside of this rectangle. And obviously, I mean, okay, I think I'm gonna stick to my explanation because that's what makes sense for me. But if it doesn't, I can try and change it over. But I looked at all the carriages with Wi-Fi connectivity, which is inside this rectangle, and because I inverted that statement, I'm looking to see whether they include all the other features at some point. So that just means whether we're looking at whether this rectangle overlaps with all the other shapes. And as you can see, it overlaps with the square for mood lighting, it overlaps with the hexagon for power outlets, and it overlaps with air purifiers and reclining seats. I mean, so and because no statements are a bit tricky, what I usually do is I try and invert them and prove that. So that's why I said all carriages with Wi-Fi connectivity had all other features or had all, yeah, or had another feature. Does that make more sense or is that just more confusing? Okay, good. Thank you. Hopefully that works. We're just going to go back to that question we were on before. So this is a probability question. So more numbers and a lot more words, I guess. So again, give you 30 seconds. You can put down an answer and hopefully share it. And then I'll go through it. After this question, it is a few more slides, so you will have a break. So just try and stick with it. Okay, I think that's around 30 seconds. So I'm going to start talking through it, but if you do want to submit your answer while I'm talking through it, then please do go ahead. Okay, a B. Okay, good to see. an answer, but I will not tell you whether that's right or not. Okay. Another B. Okay. So I'm just gonna actually before I actually get into that, let me just double check my answer is correct because I don't want to be telling you the wrong thing. Okay. I think one person did not put down an answer. If you could try and put down just an answer for now, I would appreciate it. But you don't have to feel pressured to. Okay. Yeah, just double check my answer. Okay. So I'm gonna start talking through it. So when we've got probability questions, they can look pretty bad, pretty horrible. But once you stop, oh, I just okay. Once you stop trying to calculate everything in whatever form it happens to be given, it does get a bit easier. So in this case, I'll try and put everything in the same form. You can see there's 1 in 2 chances, 1 in 5 chances, and then there's a percentage here, which is 50% and 2%. What I'll do is I'll probably convert this into 50%, so 1 in 2 to 50%, and 1 in 5 into 20%, just so it's easier to look at for me. So if I'm making down notes, I'd make it all in the same units, I guess. Okay, so first we want to understand what's actually happening in the text. So I'd read the question, and you can read the text first, but I'd read the question. So, considering only the likelihood of finding oil and its value, is it wiser to drill field B rather than field A? Okay, so we're looking at, I guess, wiseness and whether it's better to drill field B rather than field A. We're looking at oil and its value. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the text and try and understand it, and then I'm going to look at the assumptions. So there is a 1 in 2 chance that field A contains oil and a 1 in 5 chance that the value of the oil found there will be at least £1,000,000. Okay, so 50% chance that it has oil and a 20% chance that the value of the oil there is worth at least £1,000,000. That's what that sentence means. And then there is a 50% chance that field B contains oil, so it's the same as before, and 2% chance that the value of the oil found there will be less than £1,000,000. Okay, so just be a bit careful there. One says the first statement says the value of the oil will be at least 1,000,000, and then the other one is like there's a 2% chance that the oil found there will be less than £1,000,000. So in reality, I'd change that 2% to 98%. So there's a 98% chance that the value of the oil found there will be at least £1,000,000, just so it's in the same form throughout. Okay, with that in mind, let's go into the assumptions. So yes, there is 20% higher chance of finding oil valued at £1,000,000 or more in field B. Well, that isn't necessarily true because we've worked out 20% here for that first statement and then 98% chance here, and that's a 78% difference. So A is not true. Then we've got yes, if oil is found in field B, then there is 98% chance that its value will be at least £1,000,000. And that's exactly what we've said, what we've worked out, and you guys worked out too, so well done. So I would put down B, but just to double check, and because we have the time, if you don't have the time, don't worry about it. We're just going to look at the other statements. So no, in field A, the likelihood of finding oil and it being of value greater than 1,000,000 are 30% higher. Again, that difference is incorrect, so it's not C. And in field A anyways, it's less than that is in field B, so that's immediately wrong. And then no field A has a 50% greater likelihood. I don't even need to carry on reading. We know field A has a lower likelihood of having. Wait, no, I didn't even read. Carry on reading, guys, because I did. Okay, has a 50% greater likelihood of having oil. That's not true because they're both 50%. And the value of the oil found there will be 80% higher. That part's wrong as well. So that whole statement is wrong. So, yep, you guys are right. Option B. Don't confuse yourself like I did, but I'm sure you guys are fine. Okay, now we're going to be talking about outside knowledge, and you've probably heard this for all the other sections too, but this is particularly relevant for us because most of us will be applying to medicine or dentistry if we're doing the UCAT, and have spent quite a lot of time learning science. Unfortunately, decision making does not care. The information in the question is the entire universe, whether it's decision making, verbal reasoning, or quantitative reasoning. For that question alone, you will only be caring about what they say. So if the question tells you something that contradicts what you know from, I don't know, biology, chemistry, or just common sense in general, you follow the question regardless. So if the premise says all cats can fly, then for the purpose of that question and for the purpose of UCAT, congratulations, cats can now fly. The UCAT isn't testing whether you know cats can fly. It's testing whether you can reason from the information provided. And hopefully you guys do know that, but this is just going to be another reminder of that. So, for example, here, all X or Y, X are mammals. Do not add what you know about mammals to the statements given to you. You might know more, but that's not what they're testing you on. So if it's not in the premises given to you, it just doesn't exist for the time being. That's the main thing we'll take away from this. With that, we're going to be looking at proper assumptions without any probabilities. So for this one, I'll be waiting for you guys to just tell me what you think. And try not to get your opinion get in the way of the correct answer. That's all I'm going to tell you for now. After this, we'll have, I think, a recap and then one more question that I'm just going to walk through within hopefully a minute, and that will be all. So if you could just submit your answers when you've got what you think. And if not, I can just start going through it. B? B? Okay. I guess this is a mutual feeling? A B, okay. I will agree with you, and I do believe that is the right answer, but we're just going to talk through it real quick. So we want to select the strongest argument from the statements below. And the question they gave us is, does introducing vocational education, which is practical training in a skilled craft, in secondary education provide some students with a good alternative to college education? So option A is yes, getting hands-on experience at school will give students clarity to reflect on their interests and passions. Careful, when you get hands-on experience at school, that does not necessarily tell the students about their interests and passions. You would be making an assumption if you chose A, which you guys didn't. But yeah, just be careful that these two things are not mutually exclusive. So while they can relate to one another, they also may not relate to one another. So it's not A. Then we'll look at B, which we think it is. Yes, it will put an end to students with special talents having to undergo college education that does not assist in honing their skills. Well, the statement itself seems to follow. It makes sense. If a student has special talents, then they won't have to waste their time going into college doing something that doesn't hone that. So yeah, that seems to be fine. But let's just look at C and D real quick. Yes, employers prefer hiring candidates who have practical knowledge of how things work than ones with knowledge of only theoretical procedures. Okay, well, that doesn't address the question that's given to us. We're talking about students here. We're not talking about employers, so it can't be C. And then we've got D. No, it will encourage students interested in careers that require higher education to make incorrect career choices by foregoing college education. That's an opinion that, like, there's nothing factual behind that. That's just someone's opinion. So it can't be D. And it doesn't really relate to the question again directly. So yeah, correct answer would be B. So well done, guys. And now I'm just going to talk about timing for a minute or two. So with timing, you gotta be careful, and I'm sure you know that already. And this is probably the least glamorous strategy I'm going to talk about, but it is one of the most important ones. You can't let one question eat your whole section. 63 seconds that I told you before is an average. Some questions will take you less time, some will take you more, as I'm sure you've seen. The problem is when one question takes 3 minutes and you don't realize it. So always have a ceiling. If you spent a reasonable amount of time on a question and you're not making any progress, flag it, guess, move on. Guessing is free. There is no negative marking in the UCAT, not for any of the sections, so never voluntarily leave marks behind. And sweep at the end. That final bit of time you'll have isn't for solving an entire new logical puzzle. It's for making sure you've got no blanks. You don't want any blanks because that in itself is telling you you've lost marks already, while you could be gaining marks with a few guesses. So you want to have a 30-second check and see whether you're actually making any progress to getting towards the answer. If not, again, you can flag, guess, move on, guess, flag, move on, same thing. Just always put down a guess, flag it, and if you've got time, come back to it. So walking away from a question isn't giving up, and don't think of it as that. It's protecting the rest of your marks from just losing them. So with that, we're just going to look through the final question, and I'm just going to talk through it rather than asking for an answer, and hopefully you guys do agree with me. So Sunil has 5 different. Actually, no, I'm going to talk through it as if I'm doing it. So what I'll do is look at the question. On which day did he wear his green suit? So we're trying to work out the day he's wearing his green suit. Good to know. Then I'd read through the text or skim through it. So I'm just going to quickly skim through it. Okay, good to know. He wore his green suit. Okay. Okay, this is probably going to need some paper or whiteboard. So we know he wore his blue suit. I'm going to use a timeline for this just because it's timing. So blue suit comes after the brown one. So I'm just noting this down. He wore his white suit some days later than the blue one. So white suit also comes after blue, but we don't know if it comes before brown or after brown. So I'm just going to put it vaguely in that area for now. He wore the grey suit, 2 days later than the blue one. So we know grey also comes after blue, but I can put +2 between those two. Okay, so on which day did he wear his green suit? Okay. So we've got 5 weekdays to work with, and we automatically know he did not wear his green suit on a Thursday because that's just not an option here. So he's either worn on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Friday, and automatically it cannot be Monday because that would be at the beginning of the week, and that would not make sense because he wears his brown one first. Oh wait, I didn't even put that in the right place. I put green in the wrong spot. Sorry guys. Blue comes 2 days after. Grey comes 2 days after blue. So grey would be pretty far ahead. Brown and blue come before grey, so we know it can't be Monday. And it's unlikely to be Tuesday because we know brown comes first, then it's blue, then white's somewhere in that vicinity, and then it is grey. Okay, so we've got it can't be Monday, it's unlikely to be Tuesday, but it still could be. But so we're not gonna rule that out, but we just know automatically it can't be Monday. Wednesday it could be, and Friday it could be. Okay. I think I'm running really short of time. Yeah, I've only got like 2 minutes. Okay. I'll give you the answer in after the meeting in the help chat of Medent Network, but I don't think I'll have the time to actually go through this. So I'm just gonna go through the last slide. If you do have any questions, pop them in the chat now before the meeting ends. But I'm just gonna go through a quick recap and we'll be done there. So 3 things I just want you to take away from today. School marks, not questions. Remember that 35 questions give you 47 marks, which is a lot of marks, and partial marking so matters a lot. Get it out of your head. Use a grid, the circle, or a number line. Don't waste time rereading information you've forgotten. And set your ceiling. Know when you're no longer making progress and move on. And that just comes with practice and doing tests. So after your practice, don't just look at your score. Look at why you lost the marks. So here, don't just drill decision making, diagnose it. Review why you've gotten things wrong and why you've gotten things right. If it's a Venn mistake, a reversal, an assumption, whether you run out of time, make sure you're making notes of that so you can work on that. You can drill that next time, really. because you've got the time, you should look at reviewing things carefully. Sorry that was so rushed at the end, but if you could, or if you have any questions, please do let me know. If you have any feedback for me, there's a QR code here that you can scan, and I will get you the answer for the last question in the help chat. Thank you for attending. The form itself is only, I think, 5 questions or 4 questions, so it'll take like a minute maybe. Most of it's multiple choice, so thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for attending.